What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the Modest Wallet YouTube channel. Today we're going to be diving in to the 5 best Fidelity index funds for beginners. As we look into each of these funds, we will look at the overview and strategy as well as inception date of the fund, expense ratios, the turnover, the top holdings, dividend yield, the 5-year return, and the risk profile. If you aren't sure what any of that means, I will try to really describe each thing in further detail in the first fund that we mentioned. So the first fund might take a little longer than the others to really get through. For anyone unfamiliar with the Fidelity brokerage, they are a great brokerage, one that I personally use for a Roth IRA, and I did just want to mention that we did not include their 4 0% expense ratio index funds because we wanted all the funds to have a track record of at least 5 years, and those funds are not quite to that point. Be sure to subscribe so that you can eventually see our review and research on those 0% expense ratio index funds in the future. Finally, I did want to include key reasons for investing in Fidelity index funds, which they have a really cheap, and I mean cheap, expense ratios, and more importantly, no minimum investment requirements and no transition fees when purchased through their platform, and you can't beat that. The first fund on our list of the 5 best Fidelity index funds is the Fidelity 500 Index Fund, ticker symbol FXAIX. This fund inception, otherwise known as when the fund started, was February 17th, 1988. The Fidelity 500 Index Fund is a diversified domestic large cap equity strategy that seeks to closely track the returns and characteristics of the S&P 500 index. The S&P 500 is a market capitalization weighted index designed to measure the performance of 500 large cap US companies. The expense ratio is a mere 0.015%, and that's an incredibly low number and well below the market average, which is what you want so that you can ensure your capital is working for you and not going toward fees. The turnover rate is 2%. To put that really into perspective, index funds should not have a turnover rate higher than 20 to 30%, since securities should only be added or removed from the fund when the underlying index makes a change in its holdings. A rate higher than 30% suggests the fund is really poorly managed. Here's a breakdown of the top 10 holdings of the 508 total holdings that make up the fund. As you can see, all of the holdings are American companies. More than 28% of the fund's holdings are in those top 10 companies. There's also a chart showing how each stock market sector is represented in the fund. Information technology is the highest weighted sector, with 4 other sectors represented by 10% or more. I wanted to also take a look at the fund's performance. The Fidelity 500 Index Fund has paid over $2 in dividends the last 3 years, and you can see its annual performance in the purple over the last 1, 3, 5, 10, and life of the fund. Its performance is in direct alignment with the S&P 500 index, as it should. Its annual performance is fantastic. The 5-year return, a time period we like to focus on at the Modest Wallet, is more than 17%. Finally, the risk profile for this fund is a 6 out of 10, with a 1 being low risk and a 10 being high risk. The Fidelity 500 Index Fund is probably the most popular index fund from Fidelity, as you are investing in the S&P 500 index, which has a very strong record of great returns because of the 500 largest US companies that it consists of. The second fund on our list is the Fidelity Total Market Index Fund, ticker symbol FSKAX. The Fidelity Total Market Index Fund is a diversified domestic all-cap equity strategy that seeks to closely track the aggregate returns and characteristics of the Dow Jones US Total Stock Market Index. The Dow Jones is a market capitalization weighted index that includes all US companies with readily available prices across all market caps. As we discussed in other videos, a fund like this is essentially giving you the investing power into the entire stock market. The fund's inception was November 5th, 1997, and also has an exceptionally low expense ratio of 0.015% and a more than ideal turnover of 2%. The Fidelity Total Market Index Fund has 3,875 holdings, with more than 20% of the funds made up of the top 10 holdings with companies like Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Google, Facebook, and Tesla at the top. Instead of mentioning the dividend yield, these funds have paid out more than $1.50 per share the last 3 years. This fund has also experienced very nice annual growth, as you can see in the purple over the last 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, and lifetime. If we focus on the 5 year, we can see it has grown over 17% annually. Once again, really what I like to see. The risk profile for this fund is a 6 out of 10, with a 1 being low risk and 10 being high risk. Ultimately, if you're looking to purchase the entire stock market, small, mid, and large cap stocks, then the Fidelity Total Stock Market Index Fund is definitely for you. Coming in at number 3 on our list of the best Fidelity Index funds for beginners is the Fidelity Nasdaq Composite Index Fund, ticker symbol FNCMX. This fund seeks to provide investment returns that closely correspond to the price and yield performance of the Nasdaq Composite Index. The Nasdaq Index has a strong focus on technology companies, so this index fund is going to give you exposure to some of the largest tech companies in the world and have a larger portion of the fund taken up by the information systems sector. The inception date is September 25th, 2003, and this fund has an expense ratio of 0.35%, which is higher than the previous two we've discussed, but still very low compared to the industry standard. This is largely due to the slightly higher risk, higher reward, and higher turnover. Speaking of that, this fund is still below the average, but has a turnover of 9% because assets in this index tend to move around a little more. The top holdings include Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Tesla, Google, PayPal, just to name a few, but the key here is that the top 10 holdings make up over 44% of the total assets, meaning it is weighted heavier in those top 10 companies. Overall, there are 3,264 holdings that make up the Fidelity Nasdaq Composite Index Fund. Taking a look at the returns, you can see how this fund has performed. In the purple, it has done rather very nicely with annual returns above 20% and the 5 year almost at 25%. It has paid a dividend of over $1 over the past 3 years. The risk potential for this fund is like the other two funds. It is a 6 out of 10. To really summarize this fund, the Fidelity Nasdaq Composite Index Fund has provided or produced significant gains because information technology is a larger sector of this fund. You have the potential for growth, but if that sector has a rough time, this fund will as well. Fourth on the list of the best Fidelity Index funds for beginners is the Fidelity Mid Cap Index Fund, ticker symbol FSMDX. This fund's inception was September 8, 2011. The Fidelity Small Cap Index Fund is a diversified domestic mid-cap equity strategy that seeks to closely track the returns and characteristics of the Russell Mid-Cap Index. The Russell Mid-Cap Index is a market capitalization weighted index designed to measure the performance of the 800 smallest companies in the Russell 1000 index. The expense ratio is 0.025% and its turnover is 14%. Both of these numbers are superb in regards to other index funds of similar nature. Taking a look at the top holdings, you will see companies that you may have heard of, but because of a smaller market cap, ones you wouldn't see in the previous 3 index funds. There are 833 holdings, with the top 10 making up just under 5% of the entire portfolio, another difference between the previous mentioned funds. The top 5 sectors in this fund are information technology, industrials, consumer discretionary, financials, and healthcare. Let's dive into the 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, and lifetime returns. Once again, the purple represents this fund. And once again, very nice returns, what you like to see and how you like to see a long-term investment perform, especially those mid-cap companies. The 5-year is just north of 14% of those annual returns on your investment. Dividends took a significant dive between 2020 and 2021, going from 36 cents in payment for the year to about 6 cents. And if I'm doing my research right, I think that had a lot to do with the pandemic and how dividends were dramatically negatively affected for the mid and smaller cap companies. Even with that, the risk potential from Morningstar is once again a 6 out of 10. Rounding out our list of the 5 best Fidelity index funds for beginners is the Fidelity Small Cap Index Fund, ticker symbol FSSNX. This fund came into inception on September 8, 2011. The Fidelity Small Cap Index Fund is a diversified domestic small cap equity strategy that seeks to closely track the returns and characteristics of the Russell 2000 index. The Russell 2000 index is a market cap weighted index designed to measure the performance of the smallest 2,000 companies in the Russell 3000 index. So this fund is tracking the same index as the mid cap, except it's looking at the smallest companies from that index. The expense ratio is 0.025%. and it has a turnover of 19%. The turnover is creeping up into the territory you don't like as much, but is still below the threshold. As I look at the top 10 holdings, I'm actually only familiar with one of the companies. I'll let you try and figure that out, but I'll leave those on the screen for you to take a glance at. Remember, this fund has 2,031 holdings, with the top 10 holdings only making up 3.15% of the entire portfolio. Here's a glance at the returns over the years. The 5-year is over 12%. Just stopping a moment to talk about that. There are a lot of people that say it's too hard to make money in the stock market. If this list isn't proving that wrong, I don't know really what is. The small cap fund is making nice returns. Since 2014, this fund has produced a slowly growing dividend, with the past year paying almost 35 cents per share. Finally, the risk potential or risk rating is a 7, which is slightly higher than the rest on the list. There you have it, our top 5 best Fidelity index funds for beginners. This list offers a wide range of options, from the entire stock market to the S&P 500 to tech stocks, and finally, the mid and small cap focuses on where you get that exposure to companies that aren't the normal massive players. Let me know in the comments which Fidelity index fund you like the most, and if you found some value in this video, please tap that thumbs up button. It really does help our channel out, and it doesn't cost you anything to subscribe. So don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Happy investing.